we now have delivered the largest tax cuts in a generation, Mr. Speaker.
Well, imagine the shock for the Prime Minister when he finds out that under his government, taxes are on course to reach their highest level since the Second World War. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has found that for every £1 the Treasury has taken from taxpayers, less than 25 pence is coming back in tax cuts. And the Prime Minister actually wants us to slap him on the back and throw a party. By any standards, Sunak's government is being fundamentally dishonest and outright misleading when talking about tax cuts. In fact, the government's latest measures put the UK on course to have the biggest tax-raising parliament in modern history.
At the beginning of the year, I set out some priorities that this government would deliver for the British people. And over the course of this year, we have, Mr. Speaker, inflation halved.
Well, let's just sit on a shelf for a moment that the job of cutting inflation is for the Bank of England. So suggesting the government is somehow responsible for it falling is again just insulting the public's intelligence. And let's also sit on a shelf that it was this government that gave us the highest inflation in 40 years in the first place, in part due to its incompetent management of the economy. Contrary to what the Prime Minister keeps telling us, falling inflation is not a tax cut for hard-up families. Falling inflation just means prices are rising more slowly than they were before. It does not mean that price levels are actually falling. So it won't immediately help the families now struggling to put food on the table.
The economy growing.
Well, it appears the Prime Minister missed data released this morning which showed a larger than expected contraction in the UK economy for the month of October. And he'll fall off his chair when he finds out that the Office for Budget Responsibility has actually slashed its economic growth forecasts. Never in living memory have families got so much poorer over a single parliament.
Because that's how we spread opportunity in our country.
Well, no arguments from me on that one.
Debt falling.
Seriously? This government has given us the highest debt in 60 years. The latest figures barely make a dent in that.
20,000 more police officers.
By now, even Larry the Cat knows the government has delivered just 4,000 more police officers in England and Wales than we had in 2010. Don't just take my word for it. Here is the government's actual policing minister, Chris Phelps, to confirm it.
That is 4,000 more than the previous peak in March 2010.
But that's just part of the story, because in this latest con, the government is ignoring the increase in population since 2010. In fact, per capita, with an increasing population, as a result of Conservative Party policies, by the end of this Parliament we will have fewer police on our streets than we did a decade ago.
There are hundreds of thousands of fewer children in poverty today, thanks to this government.
It's utterly shameless that the Prime Minister comes to Parliament every week to repeat this. UNICEF, that's the United Nations Children's Fund, has just published a report on child poverty in 39 countries in the EU and OECD between 2014 and 2021. And one of its most shocking findings is that under the Conservative government, the UK has seen an almost 20% increase in its child income poverty rate, ranking us last place in UNICEF's league table of the world's richest countries. Last place. Just think about that. It's not a record for the government to be proud of. It's a source of national shame. And the Prime Minister knows full well that according to latest government statistics, there were 4.2 million children living in poverty in the UK in 2021-22. That's a staggering 1 in 3 children. And a major new report from Joseph Rowntree Foundation has found 1 million children in the UK experienced horrifying levels of destitution in 2022. That's the most extreme level of poverty, with families unable to meet their most basic needs of keeping warm, dry, clean and fed. 1 million children now living in destitute homes. It's an 88% rise since 2019. And if all that's not heartbreaking enough, the number of children in food poverty has doubled in the last year. It's actually doubled.